Marcus Johnson stood in front of his new house, holding the keys in his hand and smiling widely. After 8 long years in the Marines and 3 tours overseas, he finally had a place to call his own. The small 2-story house looked perfect with its white walls, blue door, and tiny front garden. The neighborhood was quiet and peaceful, with big trees lining the street and well-kept houses on both sides. It was a Saturday morning in June, and Marcus had planned to spend the whole day moving his things inside. He had saved every dollar he could during his time in the military, living simply and sending most of his pay to a savings account. Now, at 28 years old, he was ready to start a new chapter of his life as a civilian. Marcus walked up to his front door and turned the key. The house smelled like fresh paint and new carpets. The previous owners had taken good care of it, and everything looked clean and bright. He stood in the empty living room and imagined how it would look once he put his furniture in place. There would be his comfortable couch facing the big window, his bookshelf full of military history books, and his small TV where he could watch football games on Sundays. He went back outside to start unloading his truck. Marcus had packed everything himself, organizing his belongings in labeled boxes. He was wearing his favorite Marine Corps t-shirt, the one he had bought at the base store before leaving active duty. The shirt was faded but still showed the eagle, globe, and anchor symbol clearly. As Marcus carried the first box from his truck, he noticed movement in the window of the house next door. A man and woman were standing there watching him. Marcus waved in their direction, trying to be friendly with his new neighbors. The people in the window did not wave back. Instead, they stepped away from the window quickly, like they did not want to be seen. Marcus thought this was a bit strange, but he kept working. He had learned in the Marines that first impressions were not always correct, and maybe his neighbors were just shy. He carried box after box into his house, setting up his bedroom first, then his kitchen, and finally his living room. The house next door belonged to Brad and Karen Mitchell. They had lived there for 15 years and knew everyone in the neighborhood. Brad was a tall, thin man with graying hair who worked for a company that did business with the government. Karen was shorter with blonde hair that she colored every month at the local salon. She worked as a substitute teacher at the elementary school. The Mitchells considered themselves the protectors of their neighborhood. They watched everything that happened on their street and made sure everyone followed the rules. They knew which family had teenagers who played music too loud, which house had a dog that barked too much, and which neighbors did not take care of their yards properly. When they saw Marcus moving in, they immediately started making assumptions. They did not see a young veteran who had served his country. They did not see someone who had worked hard to buy his first home. Instead, they saw only the color of his skin and decided he did not belong in their neighborhood. "I don't like this," Karen whispered to her husband as they watched from behind their curtains. "This neighborhood has always been so nice and safe." Brad nodded and crossed his arms. "We need to keep an eye on him. People like that bring down property values." Neither of them had ever spoken to Marcus or knew anything about him, but they had already made up their minds. This was the way they thought about the world, dividing people into groups of us and them based on nothing but appearance. Marcus spent the rest of the morning setting up his home office. He had big plans to use his military education benefits to study engineering at the local college. The spare bedroom had good lighting and would be perfect for studying and doing homework. He arranged his desk near the window so he could look out at the trees while he worked. Around lunchtime, Marcus decided to take a break and explore his new neighborhood. He walked down the street, looking at the other houses and enjoying the peaceful atmosphere. The yards were well maintained and he could hear children playing in backyards. This was exactly the kind of place he had dreamed about during those long nights overseas. As he walked, Marcus saw an elderly woman struggling to carry heavy grocery bags from her car to her front door. Without thinking, he jogged over to help her. "Ma'am, let me help you with those," Marcus said politely, taking the heaviest bags from her hands. The woman, Mrs. Patterson, looked surprised but grateful. "Oh, thank you so much, young man. These bags get heavier every year." Marcus carried her groceries to her front porch and made sure she could handle the rest. Mrs. Patterson thanked him again and told him she lived alone since her husband had passed away 2 years ago. "I'm Marcus Johnson," he said, extending his hand. I just moved into the house 3 doors down. Welcome to the neighborhood, Marcus, Mrs. Patterson said with a warm smile. It's nice to have helpful young people around here. As Marcus walked back to his house, he felt good about his decision to move to this area. Most of the neighbors seemed friendly, and he looked forward to being part of a real community for the first time in years. But the Mitchells had watched the entire interaction from their window, and they did not see a kind young man helping an elderly neighbor. Instead, they saw what they believed was suspicious behavior and began planning their response. That evening, Marcus sat on his front porch with a cold drink, watching the sunset and feeling proud of his new home. The moving was almost finished, and tomorrow he would focus on the final details like hanging pictures and organizing his closet. He could see lights turning on in houses throughout the neighborhood as families prepared for dinner and evening activities. This felt like the peaceful, normal life he had dreamed about during his deployments. He had served his country overseas, and now he was ready to serve his community at home. Marcus had no idea that his new neighbors next door were already plotting to make his life difficult. He could not have imagined that people would judge him so harshly without even meeting him. The Marines had taught him to expect challenges and overcome obstacles, but he never expected to face such hatred from the very people he had served to protect. As the stars began to appear in the sky, Marcus went inside his new house, locked the door, and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new adventures in his civilian life, and he was excited to see what the future would hold in his new neighborhood. Marcus woke up on his first Monday morning in his new house feeling excited about the week ahead. He had planned to spend the day organizing his garage and setting up his workspace. The sun was shining through his bedroom window, and he could hear birds singing in the big oak tree in his backyard. After breakfast, Marcus went outside to water the small flower garden that came with the house. The previous owners had planted roses and daisies, and he wanted to keep them looking nice. He was wearing old jeans and a plain t-shirt, perfectly normal clothes for doing yard work. What Marcus did not know was that Brad Mitchell was already watching him from his kitchen window. Brad had his phone in his hand, and he was getting ready to make a call that would start weeks of trouble for Marcus. "This is suspicious," Brad muttered to himself as he watched Marcus tend to the flowers. "He's probably looking for ways to break into other houses." Brad dialed 911 and waited for someone to answer. "1, what's your emergency?" the operator asked. "I want to report suspicious activity in my neighborhood," Brad said, trying to sound concerned. "There's a man walking around backyards looking at houses. I think he might be planning to rob someone." The operator asked for more details, and Brad gave Marcus's address. He described Marcus as acting strange and definitely up to something. Of course, Marcus was just watering flowers in his own yard, but Brad made it sound like he was a dangerous criminal. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived at Marcus's house. Marcus was surprised to see them but remained calm. His military training had taught him to stay respectful when dealing with authority figures. "Good morning, officers," Marcus said politely. "Is there a problem?" Officer Davis, the older of the 2 policemen, looked around Marcus's yard and then back at him. "We got a call about suspicious activity. Someone said you were looking around other people's property." Marcus was confused. "I've been working in my own yard all morning. I just moved in yesterday and I was watering the flowers." The officers could see the watering can in Marcus's hand and the wet flowers behind him. Officer Martinez, the younger officer, seemed embarrassed by the whole situation. "Can you show us some identification?" Officer Davis asked. Marcus went inside and came back with his driver's license and military ID card. When the officers saw that he was a Marine veteran and that the address on his license matched the house, they realized the call was probably fake. "We're sorry to bother you, Mr. Johnson," Officer Martinez said. "Someone called in a report, but it's clear you weren't doing anything wrong." After the police left, Marcus felt upset and confused. He could not understand why someone would call the police on him for doing yard work at his own house. He had no idea that his neighbor was watching and planning more trouble. The next day, Marcus decided to play some music while he organized his garage. He kept the volume low and chose classic rock songs that his father had taught him to love. It was barely loud enough for him to hear over the sound of his own work. But Karen Mitchell was listening from next door and she had an idea. She picked up her phone and called the Homeowners Association office. "Hello, this is Karen Mitchell from Maple Street," she said in her sweetest voice. "I need to file a noise complaint about my new neighbor. He's playing extremely loud music that's disturbing the whole neighborhood." The Homeowners Association representative took down the complaint and promised to send Marcus a warning letter. Karen felt proud of herself for finding another way to cause problems for Marcus. That same week, Karen began her gossip campaign. She started at the grocery store where she often ran into other neighbors while shopping. "Have you seen the new person who moved into the Johnson house?" she asked Mrs. Chen, who lived 2 streets over. "I'm really worried about what this means for our neighborhood." Mrs. Chen looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Well, you know how these things go," Karen said, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Property values always drop when certain types of people move in. And I've already seen some suspicious behavior." Karen told the same story to anyone who would listen. At the post office, she whispered to the postal worker about her concerns. At the coffee shop, she shared her worries with other customers. She never said anything directly racist, but she used code words and hints that made people think Marcus was dangerous. Some neighbors, like Mrs. Patterson, who Marcus had helped with groceries, defended him when they heard Karen's rumors. But others began to look at Marcus differently when they saw him outside. The harassment got worse when the Mitchells started leaving notes in Marcus's mailbox. The first note was written in block letters on plain white paper. It said, "You don't belong here. Leave before something bad happens." Marcus found the note when he came home from grocery shopping. His hand shook a little as he read it. He had faced enemy soldiers overseas, but somehow this felt different and more personal. This was supposed to be his safe place, his home. More notes appeared over the next few days. Each one was more threatening than the last. They used terrible words that Marcus had heard before but hoped he would never see written down and left in his own mailbox. The notes told him to go back where he came from and warned that he was not welcome in a decent neighborhood. Marcus kept all the notes in a folder. His military experience had taught him to document everything, even though he was not sure yet what he would do with the evidence. The final straw came when Marcus decided to take his motorcycle out for a ride on Saturday morning. He had spent 2 years restoring the vintage Harley-Davidson, and it was his pride and joy. The bike was perfectly legal and not any louder than other motorcycles, but when Marcus started it up, Brad Mitchell was ready. Brad called the police again, this time complaining about excessive noise and disturbing the peace. He also called the Homeowners Association to report a noise violation. When Marcus returned from his ride, he found another threatening note in his mailbox. This one was different from the others. It mentioned his motorcycle specifically and warned that bad things happen to people who don't listen to good advice. That evening, Marcus sat in his living room and looked at all the threatening notes spread out on his coffee table. He thought about his options. He could ignore the harassment and hope it would stop, but his military training told him that bullies usually got worse when no one stood up to them. Marcus decided it was time to take action, but he would do it the right way. He would not let anger control his decisions. Instead, he would use his brain and his training to solve this problem permanently. Marcus had been living in his new house for 3 weeks when his sister called with exciting news. She was getting married in 2 months, and she wanted Marcus to come visit her in Atlanta to help plan the wedding. Marcus was thrilled to hear from his only family and immediately agreed to spend the weekend with her. "I can't wait to see you, big brother," his sister Maya said over the phone. "It's been too long since we spent time together." Marcus packed a small bag for the weekend trip. He was excited to get away from the stress of dealing with his difficult neighbors and focus on something happy like his sister's wedding. Before leaving on Friday morning, he made sure his house was secure. He locked all the doors and windows, set his alarm system, and asked Mrs. Patterson to keep an eye on his property while he was gone. "Have a wonderful trip, Marcus," Mrs. Patterson said when he stopped by to give her his phone number. "Don't worry about anything here. I'll watch your house." Marcus drove away feeling relaxed for the first time in weeks. He did not know that Brad and Karen Mitchell had been watching his house and had noticed his preparations for the trip. They had been waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. "He's leaving town for the weekend," Brad told his wife as they watched Marcus drive away. "This is our chance to send him a message he'll never forget." Karen smiled in a way that would have scared anyone who saw it. It's time to show him that he picked the wrong neighborhood to move into. The Mitchells spent Friday evening planning their attack. They wanted to do enough damage to terrify Marcus, but not so much that they would get caught. They decided to wait until late Saturday night when all the other neighbors would be asleep. Saturday night came, and the neighborhood was quiet and dark. Most families had gone to bed early, and even the streetlights seemed dimmer than usual. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Brad and Karen Mitchell crept out of their house wearing dark clothes and carrying supplies they had bought that afternoon. They started with spray paint. Using big red letters, they wrote horrible words across Marcus's front door. They painted racist slurs on his garage door and drew hateful symbols on his driveway. The white walls of his house were covered with ugly messages telling him to leave and threatening him with violence. But the Mitchells were not finished. They went to Marcus's backyard, where he had been growing a small vegetable garden. He had planted tomatoes, peppers, and herbs, spending hours each evening watering them and watching them grow. The garden represented hope and new beginnings for Marcus, but the Mitchells saw it as another target. They destroyed everything. They pulled up the plants by their roots, stomped on the vegetables that were starting to grow, and scattered the dirt everywhere. They broke the small fence Marcus had built around the garden and smashed the watering cans he kept nearby. Next, they attacked his mailbox with a baseball bat. They hit it again and again until it was completely broken and lying in pieces on the ground. Mail and packages that had been delivered that day were scattered across the lawn and torn apart. The worst was yet to come. The Mitchells had noticed that Marcus kept his beloved motorcycle in his garage, and they knew how much it meant to him. They had watched him work on it for hours, polishing every part until it shined like new, using a crowbar they had brought. From home, Brad pried open the garage door. The alarm system made a soft beeping sound, but they had timed their attack perfectly. They knew they had a few minutes before anyone would respond to the alarm. Inside the garage, they found Marcus's pride and joy. The vintage Harley-Davidson sat gleaming under the overhead light, perfect in every detail. Karen pulled out a bottle of sugar and poured it into the gas tank while Brad used his house key to scratch deep lines in the paint job that Marcus had worked so hard to perfect. But they were not done destroying the motorcycle. Brad took out a sharp knife and slashed the leather seat that Marcus had specially ordered. Karen found a hammer and used it to break the mirrors and headlight. They worked quickly and quietly, destroying months of careful restoration work in just a few minutes. The most cruel act came when they found a box of Marcus's military medals and photographs stored on a shelf in the garage. These items represented years of service and sacrifice, memories of friends Marcus had lost in combat, and achievements he was proud of. The medals included his Combat Action Ribbon, his Good Conduct Medal, and a Purple Heart he had earned when he was wounded overseas. The Mitchells grabbed the box and carried it outside. They threw the medals in a nearby dumpster like they were pieces of trash. The photographs of Marcus with his military unit, pictures that could never be replaced, were torn into pieces and scattered in the wind. When they finished their destructive work, Brad and Karen Mitchell stood in Marcus's driveway and admired what they had done. They felt proud of themselves for sending such a strong message. They believed they had won and that Marcus would be so scared and upset that he would pack up and leave the neighborhood forever. "That should teach him," Karen whispered as they snuck back to their house. "Maybe now he'll understand that he doesn't belong here." The Mitchells went to bed that night feeling satisfied with their work. They had no idea that their actions had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had underestimated Marcus Johnson in every possible way. Sunday evening arrived, and Marcus drove home from Atlanta feeling happy and relaxed. He had spent a wonderful weekend with his sister, helping her choose flowers for the wedding and meeting her fiancé's family. The drive home had been peaceful, and he was looking forward to a quiet evening in his house. But as Marcus turned onto his street, he could see something was wrong even from a distance. There were red marks on his house that had not been there when he left. As he got closer, his heart began to beat faster. When Marcus pulled into his driveway and saw the full extent of the damage, he felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. His beautiful house looked like a war zone. The racist words painted across his door and garage made him feel sick and angry at the same time. He walked around his property in shock, discovering each new piece of destruction. His garden was completely ruined. His mailbox was in pieces. And when he opened his garage door, he nearly cried at what he saw. His motorcycle, the project he had loved working on for 2 years, was destroyed. But when he found his military medals missing and realized they had been stolen, Marcus felt something change inside him. These people had crossed a line that should never be crossed. Marcus stood in his ruined garage and made a decision. He would not run away, and he would not let these cowards win. He was a United States Marine, and he had been trained to face much worse enemies than 2 racist neighbors. It was time to show Brad and Karen Mitchell what happened when they picked the wrong person to mess with. Marcus stood in his destroyed garage for a long time, staring at his ruined motorcycle and thinking carefully. His first feeling was anger, but his Marine training kicked in quickly. Getting angry would not solve anything. What he needed now was a plan, and Marines were very good at making plans. Instead of calling the police right away, Marcus decided to think like a soldier on a mission. He needed to gather intelligence, collect evidence, and build a case so strong that his enemies could not escape justice. He had learned in the military that preparation was the key to winning any battle. Marcus started by taking photographs of everything. He used his phone camera to capture every painted word on his house, every broken piece of his mailbox, and every destroyed plant in his garden. He took pictures from different angles and made sure the lighting was good so the damage was clearly visible. In his garage, Marcus photographed his motorcycle from every side. The scratches in the paint, the slashed seat, the broken mirrors. He documented it all. He also took pictures of the empty shelf where his military medals had been stored and the scattered papers that the thieves had left behind. While taking pictures, Marcus noticed something important. There were footprints in the soft dirt around his garden. The prints were clear and showed 2 different shoe patterns, one larger pair and one smaller pair. Marcus carefully photographed the footprints and measured them with a ruler. Then Marcus remembered something that made his heart beat faster with excitement. 3 days before leaving for Atlanta, he had installed a small security camera near his front door. The camera was hidden behind a plant and was not easy to see. Marcus had bought it online after receiving the first threatening note, but he had not told anyone about it. Marcus rushed to his computer and accessed the camera's memory card. What he found was better than he had dared to hope. The camera had recorded everything that happened Saturday night, and the video was crystal clear. The recording showed Brad and Karen Mitchell arriving at Marcus's house at 2:15 a.m. carrying bags full of supplies. Their faces were clearly visible under the streetlight, and Marcus could see them looking around nervously before starting their attack. The camera captured them spray painting his door, destroying his garden, and breaking his mailbox. Most importantly, the video showed them forcing open his garage door and going inside with their tools of destruction. When they came out 30 minutes later, they were carrying the box containing his military medals. The camera recorded them throwing the box into their car before driving away. Marcus saved the video file to his computer and made several backup copies. This was evidence that no lawyer or judge could argue with. The Mitchells had been caught, red-handed committing serious crimes. But Marcus was not finished gathering evidence. He remembered all the threatening notes he had saved in his folder. He spread them out on his kitchen table and photographed each one. Then he noticed something interesting. The handwriting on some notes looked different from others. It appeared that both Brad and Karen had written threatening messages. Marcus also remembered the false police reports and complaints to the homeowners association. He called the police station and requested copies of all reports filed about his address. The desk sergeant was helpful and agreed to send him the information. Next, Marcus decided to talk to his neighbors. He started with Mrs. Patterson, who had always been kind to him. "Oh, Marcus, I'm so sorry about what happened to your house," Mrs. Patterson said when she saw him. "I heard noises Saturday night but thought it was just cats fighting in the alley." Marcus showed her some of the photographs and Mrs. Patterson gasped in shock. This is terrible. Who would do such horrible things? I have my suspicions, Marcus said carefully. Have you ever seen the Mitchells acting strangely around my house? Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable but then nodded. Actually, yes. I've seen them standing in their yard at odd hours, always watching your house. And Karen has been saying awful things about you at the grocery store. Marcus asked Mrs. Patterson if she would write down what she had witnessed and sign it. She agreed immediately, saying she was tired of people like the Mitchells making the neighborhood unpleasant for everyone. Marcus visited other neighbors throughout the week. The single mother across the street, Jennifer, told him that she had seen Brad Mitchell looking through Marcus's mail several times. The elderly man 2 houses down said he had witnessed Karen Mitchell putting something in Marcus's mailbox late one evening. Most shocking of all was what Marcus learned from the Williams family, who lived at the end of the street. They told him that the previous black family who had lived in his house had been harassed by the Mitchells until they finally moved away. They did the same things to the Johnson family that they're doing to you, Mrs. Williams explained. False police reports, threatening notes, and eventually vandalism. The Johnsons were good people, but they got tired of fighting and decided to move. This information made Marcus even more determined to stop the Mitchells permanently. They had been terrorizing innocent families for years, and it was time for their behavior to have consequences. Marcus spent the next few days researching Brad and Karen Mitchell online. What he discovered was very interesting. Brad worked for a government contractor and held a security clearance that required him to have a clean criminal record. Any conviction for hate crimes or vandalism would end his career immediately. Karen worked as a substitute teacher and had to pass background checks regularly. Teachers were held to high moral standards, and criminal behavior would make her unemployable in any school district. Both of the Mitchells were active in community organizations and church groups. They presented themselves as upstanding citizens and moral leaders. Marcus realized that their reputations were very important to them, which gave him additional leverage. Marcus also discovered that the Mitchells had been involved in several neighborhood disputes over the years. They had filed complaints against other neighbors for minor issues and seemed to enjoy causing trouble for people they did not like. By the end of the week, Marcus had built an impressive case file. He had video evidence of the crimes, witness statements from multiple neighbors, photographs of all the damage, copies of the threatening notes, and detailed background information on the perpetrators. Marcus organized everything in a large folder, with each piece of evidence clearly labeled and dated. He created a timeline showing how the harassment had escalated from false police reports to serious vandalism and theft. He also calculated the financial cost of repairing and replacing everything that had been damaged or stolen. Finally, Marcus was ready to take action. He had enough evidence to send the Mitchells to prison and ruin their careers and reputations. But he decided to make one final move before involving the police. Marcus called his military legal assistance office and spoke with a lawyer who specialized in helping veterans with legal problems. The lawyer reviewed Marcus's evidence and whistled in amazement. "This is one of the strongest cases I've ever seen," the lawyer said. "You've done excellent work gathering this evidence. These people are going to face serious consequences for what they've done." Marcus smiled for the first time since returning from Atlanta. Tomorrow, he would present his case to the police and watch as Brad and Karen Mitchell learned what happened when they picked the wrong Marine to mess with. Monday morning arrived, and Marcus felt calm and confident as he prepared for the most important battle of his civilian life. He dressed in his best clothes, a clean white shirt, dark pants, and the shoes he wore to military ceremonies. He wanted to look professional and serious when he presented his evidence to the police. Marcus organized his case file one final time, making sure every piece of evidence was in perfect order. The video footage was saved on multiple devices, the witness statements were signed and dated, and the photographs showed every detail of the damage clearly. He had prepared for this meeting like he was briefing a commanding officer on a critical issue. At 9 o'clock, Marcus walked into the police station carrying his evidence folder. He asked to speak with Detective Sarah Rodriguez, who handled hate crime cases in the area. Detective Rodriguez was the experienced officer who had seen many cases like this, but she had never seen a victim who came so well prepared. "Good morning, Detective Rodriguez," Marcus said politely. "I'm Marcus Johnson, and I need to report serious crimes committed against me by my neighbors." Detective Rodriguez invited Marcus into her office and offered him coffee. She could tell immediately that this was not going to be a typical complaint. Marcus was calm, organized, and clearly intelligent. "Tell me what happened, Mr. Johnson," Detective Rodriguez said, taking out her notepad. Marcus began by explaining the harassment that had started on his first day in the neighborhood. He showed her copies of the false police reports, the threatening notes and witness statements from neighbors. Detective Rodriguez took notes carefully, already impressed by the quality of evidence Marcus had collected. Then Marcus played the security camera video on his laptop. Detective Rodriguez watched in amazement as the screen clearly showed Brad and Karen Mitchell vandalizing Marcus's property and stealing his military medals. The video was so clear that their faces were easily recognizable, and the timestamp showed exactly when each crime occurred. "This is incredible evidence," Detective Rodriguez said, shaking her head. "I've never seen a case where the criminals were caught so clearly on video." Marcus then showed her the photographs of all the damage, the calculated repair costs, and his research on the Mitchells' backgrounds. He explained how their jobs required clean criminal records and how their reputations in the community were very important to them. Detective Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, reviewing all the evidence. Finally, she looked up at Marcus with a serious expression. "Mr. Johnson, you've built one of the strongest cases I've ever seen. These people are going to face serious charges, and with this evidence, they have no chance of escaping justice." Within 2 hours, Detective Rodriguez had obtained arrest warrants for Brad and Karen Mitchell. The charges included vandalism, breaking and entering, theft, destruction of property, and hate crimes. Because the crimes were motivated by racial hatred, they were elevated to felony charges that carried serious prison time. At noon, Marcus watched from his front window as police cars arrived at the Mitchell house. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction as he saw Brad and Karen Mitchell being led away in handcuffs. Their shocked faces showed that they had never expected to face consequences for their actions. The arrest made immediate waves throughout the neighborhood. News of the Mitchells' crimes spread quickly, and neighbors began calling Marcus to express their support and apologize for not speaking up sooner. Mrs. Patterson was the first to visit Marcus after the arrests. "I'm so sorry we didn't do more to help you earlier," she said with tears in her eyes. "What they did was wrong, and I'm glad they're finally being held accountable." The local newspaper picked up the story, and within days it became front page news. The headline read, "Local couple arrested for hate crimes against veteran neighbor." The article included details about the security video and the systematic harassment Marcus had endured. The community response surprised everyone, including Marcus. When people learned what had really happened, they organized a neighborhood cleanup day to repair the damage to Marcus's house. Local businesses donated paint, plants for his garden, and materials to fix his mailbox. Most touching of all was when a group of military veterans heard about the stolen medals. They organized a ceremony to replace Marcus's honors and presented him with a new display case for his awards. The local VFW Post made Marcus an honorary member and invited him to speak at their monthly meetings. The legal consequences for the Mitchells came swiftly and severely. Brad lost his security clearance immediately when his employer learned about the charges. Without his clearance, he could not do his job and was fired within a week. Karen was banned from working in any school district and lost her teaching license permanently. Their lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence was so strong that the prosecutor refused to reduce the charges. The video footage made it impossible for the Mitchells to claim innocence or blame someone else for the crimes. Marcus also filed a civil lawsuit against the Mitchells, seeking damages for the destroyed property, emotional distress, and punitive damages. His military legal assistants connected him with a law firm that specialized in hate crime cases and agreed to take the case without charging fees up front. The financial impact on the Mitchells was devastating. Their legal defense costs drained their savings account, and the civil lawsuit threatened to take everything they owned. They were forced to put their house up for sale, but potential buyers stayed away when they learned about the criminal charges. Within 6 months, the Mitchells pleaded guilty to all charges to avoid a trial that would have brought even more public attention to their crimes. Brad was sentenced to 18 months in prison, while Karen received 12 months and 3 years of probation. They were also ordered to pay full restitution to Marcus for all damages and legal costs. The neighborhood changed dramatically after the Mitchells were gone. Marcus became a respected leader in the community, organizing block parties and starting a neighborhood watch program that focused on helping residents rather than harassing them. He used his engineering skills to help neighbors with home improvement projects and always made time to help elderly residents with yard work and repairs. Marcus also started a support group for military veterans in the area, meeting monthly at his house to share experiences and help each other adjust to civilian life. The group grew quickly and became an important resource for veterans dealing with various challenges. The house next door remained empty for months, until a young family with children moved in. Marcus welcomed them warmly and helped them settle into the neighborhood. The new neighbors quickly learned that Marcus was someone they could count on for help and friendship. 1 year later, Marcus stood in his front yard looking at his beautiful house and well-maintained garden. The racist graffiti was gone, replaced by a fresh coat of paint in his favorite blue color. His motorcycle had been fully restored and looked better than ever. Most importantly, his stolen military medals had been replaced and were displayed proudly in his living room. As Marcus watered his thriving vegetable garden, he reflected on everything that had happened. The experience had been painful and frightening, but it had also shown him the importance of standing up to hatred and the power of a well-prepared plan. He had proven that justice was possible when good people refused to stay silent in the face of evil.